All right, welcome back to The Bright Side. Thanks for joining us once again. We left off our last program talking about the amazing cell. One of the big problems with how we take care of our body or how we think of our bodies, we look in the mirror, we see ourselves as this uniform entity. We don't see ourselves with Superman zoom-in vision. If we did, we would see that we were made up of little tiny particles, little tiny pieces, little tiny animals, if you will. And that's what a cell is. Got about 100 trillion cells, depending on who you ask. The average human being, anyway, is composed of 100 trillion cells, so they say, of 220 different types. That's a lot of cells, man. That would be if cells were people, that would be enough people to fill 15,000 planet Earths. And in a way, cells are like little people. Every cell has its own nervous system, it has its own digestive system, it has its own respiratory system, it has its own skeletal system, it has its own reproductive system, it has its own immune system. Cells are basically a microcosm of us. Us as the godlike entity. In fact, we are like a godlike entity to ourselves. We got about 220 or so different types of cells. The idea that the health of the body is all about the cells is called cell theory. And cell theory is based on 6 main ideas. Number 1, all living things are made up of cells. Number 2, the cell is the most basic structural unit of all living things. The most basic fundamental unit of all living things. Number 3, all cells come from other cells. They don't just pop into existence. They are derived from other cells via something called cell division. Number 4, cells contain hereditary genetic information that's passed from one cell to another as these cells divide. So baby cells are duplicates of parent cells. Number 5, despite superficial differences in cells of chickens and ants and bees and birds and goats and sheep and human beings, despite superficial differences, all cells are basically the same. All cells have similar structural components. All cells perform the same kind of processes, and this allows us to glean understandings about human health and human biochemistry by examining a chicken cell or by examining a frog cell. And this is how scientists do it. They will take a cell from an animal like a frog or a chicken or a pig or a goat, and they'll do whatever they do to ascertain what's happening in that cell, and they'll extrapolate what they find out to human health. Number 6, and this is the most important idea when it comes to cell theory. This is key. This is where we learn that all disease is cell disease. The sixth principle of cell theory is all chemistry, all biochemistry of life occurs within cells. All energy flow, all metabolism, all biochemistry occurs within a cell. That means whatever goes right or whatever goes wrong in life, that is us, whatever shows up as health or lack thereof is inside the cell. It's an intracellular phenomenon. It's happening inside the cell. All energy flow, all metabolism, all breakdown and build up, all chemistry is happening inside the cell. Now, why do you suppose nobody ever talks about the fact that all disease is cell disease? Because drugs and the medical model are useless. They're impotent at the level of a cell. The medical model cannot help us at the level of a cell. The medical model can only interfere with the chemistry of a cell by blocking enzyme reactions or by blocking receptors or by blocking something. Drugs and doctors cannot help us at the level of a cell. But we don't need drugs and doctors. We can do it ourselves. This is the message of the bright side. This is the good news. We don't need doctors unless you get hit by a car or hit by a moving object. You have some kind of trauma. You have a heart attack. You need surgery. That's different. Other than that, we don't need doctors. They can only interfere with the process, and the chauvinistic, arrogant idea of the medical model that they can just waltz right into our biochemistry and manipulate it with drugs and devices and medical procedures where they cut us up like a Christmas turkey is so galling and so obnoxious and so irritating it's hard to control myself sometimes when I think about it. A cell's behavior is tightly regulated. It's tightly controlled. A cell doesn't understand high-tech pharmacology. Pharmacology is basically a 200-year-old science, at least in its high-tech version. A cell is super organized, super structured, and super intelligent. It doesn't need a medical professional interfering with what it's doing. What's more, a cell is highly compartmentalized. It has sections in it. It has a skeleton. It has an information center. It has an information processor. And it has hundreds, sometimes thousands of little fuel-burning engines and protein processing plants and piping within which various chemicals travel. And this incredible structure and incredible organization, all of this awesomeness, all of this miraculousness, all of this amazingness is happening on what appears to be nothing more than a blob of jelly 50 times smaller than the period at the end of a sentence. And the whole thing is covered with a layer of oil 1,000 times thinner than the 50 times smaller than the period of an end at the end of a sentence blob that it covers. And this oil is no mere coating. It's not just a film of oil. The oil is actually a brain. The oil that coats the cell that's 50,000 times thinner than a period at the end of a sentence is an information processor. Oh my God! This is the most amazing, incredible concept that we should all be on our knees being blown away because of the awesomeness of it all. All right, I'm Pharmacist Ben. You're listening to The Bright Side on the Genesis Communication Network. We got more good health information coming at you right after this. Don't go away. Okay, so we're talking cells, cell theory, the idea that the body is built up of cells, the idea that all disease is cell disease. This is very important because if we don't understand how to address the juncture or the point where our disease is really focused on, we're going to become victims and prey to a medical model that is built to predate, built to be predators, built to take advantage of our ignorance. And aside from that, it's just mind-blowing. It's just awesomeness. The idea that a cell, of which we have 100 trillion that composes our body, the idea that this little tiny blob that's 50 times smaller than a period at the end of a sentence can contain a nervous system and a skeletal system and an information processing system and a reproductive system and a waste management system and a detoxifying system, all in this little blob 50 times smaller than the period at the end of a sentence, is a testimony to the amazingness of the divine force, just as much as the planets and the cosmos are a testimony to the amazingness of the divine force. And this is all what we are composed of. Now, we left off before we went to break talking about the little sliver of oil that coats these tiny little cells. It's 1,000 times smaller than the cell itself. This little tiny sliver of oil is an information processor. It's a brain. It is the brain of a cell. And this information processor, this sliver of oil that coats the cell, is made up mostly of fats and cholesterol. Yes, cholesterol. Tell that to the next boneheaded medical professional that says, you gotta watch your cholesterol level, you gotta stop eating your cholesterol. Perhaps he needs to go back to his cell biology or microbiology classes in medical school. In any case, this information processor is called a cell membrane. It's teeny, 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 tiny. And oh, by the way, inside the cell, you've got all these little substructures that live inside the cell, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of substructures, and guess what? Many of these substructures, they're also covered with their own membrane. How incredible is it that the cell, 100 times smaller than the head of a pin, thousands of times smaller, 1,000 times smaller, 50 times smaller than a period at the end of a sentence. How incredible is it that this tiny little structure that can't even be seen with the naked eye has little tiny substructures, each of which can't even be seen under a microscope, each of which have their own membrane, thousands of times smaller than the substructures themselves. And as fascinating as these structures are, structures with names like endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus and mitochondria and lysosomes. We're not going to get into any of these now, but how incredible is it that these little things, which are geographically located within a cell with precision and exactitude, each have their own covering, their own membrane. In all of life, in the entire miracle of life, the ultimate and fundamental miracle, in my opinion, is the cell. And in my opinion, we are far too glib about talking about the cell. We talk about it all the time, and then we just move on about our lives, our families, our mortgages, our loves, our joys, our fears, our illnesses, our day-to-day projects and problems. We forget or brush aside, brush under the table the fundamental miracle that underlies all of these things, the fundamental miracle that underlies our world, the fundamental miracle that underlies our bodies, the cell. And given its fundamental nature, doesn't it behoove us to at least contemplate or place a little bit of attention on what the heck these things are that underlie our existence? Cells are made of molecules like everything else. But to say that cells are made of molecules really does molecules injustice. It makes molecules sound like just simply building blocks. And sometimes when people hear the term molecules, they just tune out, especially non-scientists or lay people. But molecules are really interesting. And molecules have this reputation of being boring and technical and scientific. If I call this program the molecule side instead of the bright side, or all about molecules, or molecules and you, I doubt I'd have a lot of listeners. If I promoted this program as a 1-hour program about molecules, there probably wouldn't be a lot of folks listening. And it's just too bad. Molecules just don't seem, at least to the non-scientific, they just seem to be boring, not too interesting, and that is too bad, because the fact of the matter is molecules, of which cells are made of, are themselves incredibly and endlessly fascinating. Molecules have personalities. Molecules communicate to each other, and what's more, molecules communicate to each other musically. They sing to each other. There's a really neat little book about molecules called Molecular Consciousness. It's a tiny little book, maybe 100 pages or so. And it's really, really well written, easy to understand. It describes the nature of the molecule in layman's terms. And in the book, the author makes the case that molecules are in constant communication with each other. They're constantly talking to each other, conveying information to each other by storing data, storing information, and then transmitting it. And how is this information stored and transmitted? Via super fast rhythms. On and off, Morse code-like fluctuations in energy. And these fluctuations have a rhythm, and these fluctuations have a musical quality. That's right. Molecules literally sing to each other. A molecule, each type of which is like this little jewel, a little gem. And this molecule is itself composed of parts that we call atoms. And these atoms are combined and structured in a unique pattern that represents and looks like, under the proper magnification, a gem, a jewel. And it has a musical quality that can be detected. You can hear molecules singing with scientific instruments. You can reproduce the singing of molecules via scientific instruments. Some of you may have heard of frequency modulating healing machines. The Rife machine, a guy named Royal Rife came up with the idea that you could use these kinds of frequencies and rhythms and energies and musical qualities to heal cells and change cells and restructure molecules. This is so amazing, folks. All right, we're coming back. I want to tell you a few more things about molecules, and then we'll come back and then we'll take your phone calls at 855-660-4261. You're listening to The Bright Side on the Genesis. All right, we are back on The Bright Side. I'm your host, Pharmacist Ben. A couple more things I want to tell you here about molecule. Actually, you know what? I'll wait till the next program. Just sit with that idea. Molecules sing to each other. Molecules talk to each other. They're musical. And you can actually listen to molecules singing if you have the right kinds of scientific devices. When we come back on our next Bright Side episode, we'll finish up a little bit more on cells, and then we'll talk about probably, at least possibly, the most important nutritional supplement that you could use for the health of a cell, more specifically for the health of the cell membrane, the brain of the cell. We'll do that on our next Bright Side episode. Time to hit our phones. 855-660-4261 is our number. Let's go to Val in Texas. What's going on, Val? Welcome to the Bright Side. Good morning.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for taking my call. I've listened to you for quite a while. I have recently been diagnosed with osteoarthritis early in life, and I just put it off for about 30 years because I didn't want to. I kept thinking that something better would come along the longer I waited. Well, now I'm 50, and I've heard your show a lot about all the things to take about reducing inflammation. But my specific question is there something to rebuild cartilage? Because they are now saying that I'm inevitable for 2 full knee replacements, and so they of course they want to do the Orthovis, which is a synthetic hyaluronic acid injection. But
before they do,
they want
to do it before. I'm sorry, Val. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Val. They want to do this hyaluronic acid analog before or as a replacement or instead of knee replacement?
Well, because I'm so supposedly young at 50, I think that the knee replacements only last for so long. So I think that what they're trying to do is put it off as long as they possibly can. And so the hyaluronic acid, they said, would be something more as almost temporary, like a lubricant here.
Like a temporary measure until you're old enough to have a knee replacement.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
All right, so let's talk about knee replacement a little bit. Do you know what a knee replacement is and how it works? Do you understand the concept?
His knees replaced, so yes, I've kind of seen it, and I did look up some videos that made me very nauseous.
I don't blame you. It's an awful surgical procedure. Now, if you need it, you need it. But these days, they have these knee replacement factories where they just push people in and put them out. They make $50,000 to $100,000 per knee replacement surgery, and they're making a boatload of money, and there's a lot of incentive to keep people going through knee replacements. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't need to be done at times. It may. But there's certainly you certainly want to explore all your alternatives before you do a surgical procedure, especially if you're thinking of having both knees replaced. The knee replacement for the listeners is where they kind of they sort of smooth out each side of the knee. The knee is made up of two bones that kind of connect to each other. It's a joint. You got your two leg bones that connect to each other, and there's supposed to be cartilage in between that, in that connection area. That cartilage wears off, and they tell you need a knee replacement. What a knee replacement is when they smooth down either side of the bones, and then they cap the bones, almost like when they cap your teeth. If they smooth out your teeth, and they put a cap on them, if you can picture how that's done, that's exactly what a knee replacement is. The knee bone will get, or the leg bone will get smoothed out, and sanded down, literally sanded down, and then they'll stick a cap on either side of it, and they call that a knee replacement. It can be beneficial if you're really, really old and you're very decrepit and your body's been falling apart for years, but you're only 50 years old, Val, and I would suggest you explore a lot of alternatives, one of which is nutritional. Now, as far as rebuilding cartilage goes, that's a little bit tricky because there's not a lot of blood in cartilage. Tissue gets rebuilt via nutrients and oxygen that travel through the blood. There's not a lot of blood supply in cartilage, so cartilage is a little bit tricky to rebuild. That having been said, you still want to explore the possibility because you can do things to rebuild cartilage, at least partially. And that involves most especially eating cartilage and eating the amino acids that help you build cartilage. Bone soup with the cartilage, with the knobby part, the white part in the bones, is one of the best ways to help rebuild cartilage. That should be your meal of the day every day, Val. I'd be doing it every single day, making your own homemade chicken soup. You drop the chicken bones in the water, or a whole chicken in the water, turn it into soup, and then that should be, and make sure the cartilage is dissolved by adding some apple cider vinegar into the water. And then you add veggies, of course, and spices, etc. And that should be your main source of nutrition, or one of your main sources of nutrition, if you're interested in helping rebuild cartilage. And by the way, the same kind of components that go into the cartilage in your knee go into the musculature of the arteries, the connective tissue, I should say, of the arteries. So you'll also be helping your circulatory system when you start to do these cartilage rebuilding strategies. And it's the same thing for your skin also, so you'll be preventing wrinkles. The same kind of building blocks that are involved in building cartilage in the knee are involved in keeping your skin from wrinkling and keeping your arteries and your circulatory system vessels strong. So you're going to do and it's also good for your immune system too, so you'll get immune benefits there as well. That's number one. Get on the glucogel caps, number two. That'll give you some of the raw material building blocks for cartilage. Keeping inflammation down, as you mentioned, is also very, very important, and that means the digestive system. This is the main source of the entrance of inflammatory factors that enter into the body. So if you have any digestive problems, you need to be correcting those. There's great anti-inflammatory nutrients, essential nutrients. Vitamin E, probably the most important, along with vitamin C. In fact, I would go so far as to say both vitamin E and vitamin C, which work together, are your most important strictly anti-inflammatory nutrients. Specifically for the cartilage in your knees, essential fatty acids are going to be important. Make sure you're using your ultimate EFAs. I'd be using 9 to 12 a day. Get on the Healthy Start Pack. You'll get your magnesium, you'll get your essential nutrients, and you'll get your essential fatty acids as well. And then from a non-essential standpoint, that is, you not must have the way you need must have vitamin C and E and minerals, etc. You might want to think about high hyaluronic acid supplements. You can get 100 to 200 milligrams a day, capsules that come in 100 to 200 milligram dosage forms. You could take 1 or 2 of those capsules a day, 100 to 200 milligrams a day. You can also get something called eggshell membrane capsules. An eggshell membrane, in addition to containing high hyaluronic acid, also contains some growth factors that might be helpful. And you can find eggshell membrane in health food stores or on the internet. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, you know what else is really good for helping rebuild tissue is silica gel, and you'll have to get that on the internet as well. It's hard to find. Look for liquid silica gel and do 1 to 2 teaspoonfuls every day. Don't forget about the basics, which are protein. I'd be using whey protein. The Natural Factors whey is my new favorite whey. Whey protein, get the natural factors. I like the cocoa flavor, but whatever flavor you like, make sure you're using around a half a gram or so of protein per pound of body weight. So lots of good ideas for you there, Val. I would wait to the last minute to have a knee replacement. In fact, I would see if I could avoid having a knee replacement if I were you. Is that helpful?
Right. Can I ask you about the bone? Does it matter what kind of bone it is? Should it be either
chicken's the best?
Chicken? I'm sorry?
Yeah, chicken's the best because you get the most cartilage out of chicken. Beef will work too, but you get more cartilage out of chicken, and chicken cartilage. There's a lot of good literature on chicken cartilage for helping rebuild your cartilage. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question about my mother? They want her to go in and unblock her 80% blocked arteries.
You know, go for chelation. If you want to, she's 80 years old, so she's been blocking her arteries for 8 decades, and you're not going to necessarily turn this thing around instantly, and it may be too late. You know, she may have, if it's 80 to 90% clogged, she may need to do something right away. If she doesn't want to go through surgery, and I never recommend heart surgery unless it's a must, have her explore chelation therapy, EDTA or chelation therapy. And by the way, you guys, if you don't have clogged arteries, but you're just getting older, you might want to do chelation therapy to prevent clogged arteries. Chelation therapy with EDTA. They inject this EDTA material right into your veins, and it helps attract minerals and metals out of the blood and out of the arteries. All right, got to move on. Thanks so much for your call, Val. I'm Pharmacist Ben. We'll be back right after this. Okay, Mark in New Hampshire, what's going on? Welcome to the bright side, buddy.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, what's cooking, my man?
I raised my BTT cocktail towards you. We're very fortunate to have you on our side.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But I have a question. My molecules are singing, but from time to time they're tone deaf. And when I stand up from a kneeling position, or even if I'm just bent over with one elbow on my knee, picking weeds up with the other hand.
Yes, you get dizzy.
I get dizzy.
That's classic. That's called orthostatic hypotension or postural hypotension. That's a sign that your blood vessels aren't adjusting. You know, when we move, when we stand up, when we sit down, when we walk, there's all these little tiny microscopic movements that are occurring in our blood vessels to help adjust the pressure and the gravity and help us sense movement and helps our body helps our brain sense what our body is doing. That doesn't happen correctly when we have adrenal problems, and the adrenal glands are your body's stress management glands. So it's very understandable, given our 21st century crazy stress-filled lifestyle. And I'm not just talking, by the way, emotional or mental stresses. I'm also talking physiologic stresses. It's very typical and not unusual at all for us to have adrenal problems, which can precede orthostatic postural hypotension, which is what dizziness is. Sometimes people will get it when they go to the gym. They'll work out a little bit, and as they're bending down to do their deadlifts or whatever kind of exercise they're doing, and then they're standing up, they'll notice that they're dizzy a little bit. Sometimes older folks will have it, and pretty much anybody who's got some adrenal burden will experience this kind of issue. If you're drinking coffee, it's going to be worse, and if you're eating a lot of sugar, it's going to be worse. But you don't have to be a coffee drinker, and you don't have to be a sugar junkie in order to experience this problem. Well, number one, first and foremost, Mark, what you want to do is you want to figure out what's getting into your body that's causing this stress. There's a couple major stressors that are associated with the adrenal glands. Number one is going to be food, especially sugar. When we go low blood sugar, which was what happens after we eat a sugary meal, the sugar will get pulled out of our blood and we'll be hypoglycemic. When we go low blood sugar, that puts a major burden on the adrenal glands. And when we're low oxygen, that puts a major burden on the adrenal glands. In fact, that's the two major burdens that the adrenal glands have to deal with: low blood sugar and low oxygen. So keeping your blood sugar stable, number one. Well, first of all, eliminating any kind of problem foods that are getting into the body. That's the most important thing you could do. That's always the most important thing you could do. If you have digestive problems, that's great, because then you know that there's certain foods that are causing the problems. If you don't have digestive issues or obvious ones, look for them, because without finding them, it's going to be much more difficult to eliminate problem foods. So look for digestive issues, eliminate problem foods. Step number one. Step number two, keep your blood sugar stable. How do you do that? Not with willpower, but with protein and with low calories, or restricting your calories, keeping your calories down. Protein, every time you crave sugar or bread or pasta, make sure you're using some protein. And eating less foods can also have a stabilizing effect on the blood sugar. Eating less food, I should say. And then also using nutrients like the Sweeties from Longevity, the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, especially the B vitamin niacin and the B vitamin thiamine, both very important for sugar metabolism. Magnesium is also important for sugar metabolism, as is the mineral zinc. And you may also get some benefits from the amino acids arginine and taurine, both of which can help you stabilize your blood sugar. There's other things you could do too, but in the interest of moving on, that should give you a good head start. The third thing is oxygen. Under conditions of hypoxia, low oxygen, the stress response is amplified. And by the way, I've got a blog post coming up at pharmacistben.com where I talk about hypoxia and weight gain, low blood oxygen, and the inability to lose weight. But as far as dizziness goes, low blood oxygen, hypoxia, poor respiration, or inflammation that's blocking oxygen to tissues will lead to dizziness secondary to adrenal problems. So slow, deep breathing, my friend, especially when you notice the dizziness. In fact, slow, deep breathing can actually eliminate that dizzy problem, even if you don't do anything else. My dad had that problem a couple of years ago. He was noticing that he was getting dizzy, and he never listens to me, but he got so desperate he actually asked my advice, which I was very surprised about. And I told him about slow, deep breathing, and he was blown away, as you will be too, Mark, when you start using your slow, deep breathing techniques by how fast your dizziness improves, especially when you notice the dizziness. Stop whatever you're doing and take some slow, and I emphasize the word slow, deep breaths. If you do it too fast, you can make matters worse. You can actually cause more problems and cause more dizziness if you breathe too fast. So maybe get the app My Calm Beat on your smartphone, or bio breathing on your smartphone, and that'll help you learn to pace your breath so you get a nice slow breath. And you always want to exhale a little bit more than you inhale. So inhale maybe 7 or 8 seconds slowly in through the nose, down to the bottom of your belly, even all the way down to the bottom of your feet, and then bring the breath back up and exhale a couple seconds longer, maybe 9 or 10 seconds longer than you're inhaling. Got 3 great strategies there for you, Mark. I hope that helps, and thanks so much for your kind words. I appreciate it.
Anything else?
Anything else? Is that good?
That's good. I appreciate it.
God bless, man. Have a beautiful day. Okay, Joni in Texas, welcome to the Bright Side. What's up? How can we help you?
Okay, this is Joan. I heard you say Joni, and I wasn't sure you were talking to me.
I was just getting friendly with you. I'm sorry. Is it Joan?
That's okay.
Okay.
Listen, my mom she's 77 years old.
Yes.
She had open heart surgery a year ago in March.
Okay.
And she was under about 5 hours. And she said she noticed about day 2, she said, my memory just doesn't seem right. My mind or my head, she said she felt like she was off, is the way she said it to me. And as time progressed, she's, she was living alone, but once this happened, my brothers felt that she needed to go to somebody's home and stay. And, of course, she did need that care. And so in the process, she was in a different home, different environment, and, she started to do things that were a little bit different. Like when she made coffee, she poured the water, for instance, where the coffee grounds go, and vice versa.
Okay.
And, she had some of those cognitive issues. And so then it seemed like things got worse. And so then my brother took her to her primary care physician, and he said, well, we need to put her on Aricept.
Oh,
and
geez.
so then, she started taking that, and oh my gosh, what happened is she started having seizures.
Oh,
and
my God.
So then one of my brothers said, in fact, one day she was here with me, and she was fine, and then she said, I'm going to lay down, and then the next thing I knew, she was calling me, and she was on the floor, and she was vomiting. I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, I don't remember what happened, and she had fallen and hit her head. And needless to say, my one brother said, you know what, enough of that Aricept. I think it's causing the seizures.
It could very well be.
Okay, and we took her off of it, and she hasn't had any since, but she seems to be, from time to time, struggling with some kind of memory issues, and I'm wondering what is it we can do.
Lots
to
you
help
could do.
her.
Lots you could do. First of all, Aricept and anti-Alzheimer's disease drugs don't work. They're only for desperate measures. If you have they don't work. There's no need for them. And any medical professional that dispenses them should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah.
So they're not reading the literature. Even the literature itself tells you that Aricept is not for everyone. It's not going to work for everybody. It doesn't work for anybody. None of these drugs work for anybody. They're just desperate measures. Nobody really knows how to treat Alzheimer's disease because it's not a drug issue. It's a sign that blood and nutrients aren't getting into the brain. It's secondary to heart surgery. That's not unusual. So here's what you need to do, Number one, as always, if there's any kind of inflammatory factors that are getting into the body through foods, eliminate those foods. Number two, support digestive health with fermented foods and the Biolumin Nightly Essence probiotics from Longevity. Number three, start to use make sure she's using the Mighty 90 essential nutrients, the basic building blocks that every human being needs. That is the essential fatty acids, which by themselves have wonderful brain health benefits. The Beyond Tangy Tangerine, which again, by itself has wonderful brain health benefits. We've told this story about Ted Anderson, the guy who owns the GCN radio network. He gave some BTT to his dad, and the results were almost miraculous. They looked miraculous, just that alone. Then you also want to use, make sure that she's doing the OsteoFX so she gets her Mighty 90 essential nutrients. Vitamin E is stupendously important for the brain. I mean, unspeakably important. It's hard to find vitamin E in foods. Go today. Don't waste a day. Go get her some mixed tocopherols and make sure she's taking 400 international units a day. She can miss a day or two. But try to get health food store. But you should take them with food. It's called mixed.
I'm sorry.
No worries. We're going to run out of time here, so I'm just going to tell you real quick. Mixed tocopherols. TOCOPHEROLS. Like a miracle for the brain. We're out of time. I wish I had more time to talk to you. Send me an email, ben@ksco.com. I'll answer you personally. Make sure you put your phone number in there. Thanks so much for listening, folks. I'm Pharmacist Ben. Have yourselves a wonderful, beautiful day. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye for now.